The fall of Jezreel, the end of an era.
Jehu's chariot tore into the outskirts of Jezreel, his horses breathing heavily from the relentless pace. King Joram of Israel, recovering from battle wounds, rode out to meet him alongside King Ahaziah of Judah. They met at a highly specific and cursed piece of ground, the property that had once belonged to Naboth the Jezreelite. This was the very vineyard that Joram's mother, Jezebel, had stolen through conspiracy, judicial murder, and lies decades earlier. Joram called out to his commander, "Is it peace, Jehu?" Jehu's reply cut through the air like a sword.
What peace can there be, so long as the whorings and the sorceries of your mother Jezebel are so many?
Realizing the betrayal, Joram turned his reins to flee, shouting, "Treason, Ahaziah!"
But Jehu drew his bow with full strength. The arrow pierced Joram between his shoulders, passing through his heart, and he collapsed in his chariot.
Jehu ordered his captain to cast the body into Naboth's field, declaring that the Lord had remembered the blood of the innocent. With the king dead, Jehu entered the gates of the city.
High above the courtyard, Queen Jezebel heard the commotion. She knew her time was short and her dynasty was collapsing.
Yet, instead of hiding or weeping, she chose defiance.
She painted her eyes, adorned her head, and looked out the window, waiting for the conqueror.
As Jehu entered the gate, she mocked him from above, comparing him to Zimri, a notorious traitor who ruled for only 7 days. Jezebel attempted to use her presence to intimidate the rebel commander, but her political power had already evaporated. Jehu didn't argue with her. He simply looked up at the window and shouted into the palace, "Who is on my side?"
Who? 2 or 3 eunuchs, the very servants who had spent years catering to the queen,
looked out at him. Jehu gave a brutal 3-word command. Threw her down without hesitation. The servants gripped the elderly queen. They hurled her out of the window.
Her blood splattered against the stone wall and the horses as Jehu's chariot trampled her underfoot.
It was a cold, unceremonious end for a woman who had once dominated the religious and political landscape of an entire nation. After the violence, Jehu went inside to eat.
He eventually paused and gave an order to bury her, noting she was a king's daughter. But when the soldiers went outside to collect her remains, they found almost nothing left.
The stray dogs had consumed her body.
They found only her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands.
He remembered the terrifying words of Elijah the Tishbite. "In the territory of Jezreel, the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, so that they cannot say, 'This is Jezebel.'" Decades of delay had not softened the divine decree. The house built on tyranny, idolatry, and blood had crumbled into the dirt. To understand the depth of this tragedy, one must look back. King Ahab had married Jezebel, a princess of Sidon.
She brought the worship of Baal and Asherah into Israel.
They built a house of ivory and a temple for a foreign god. It was Elijah the Tishbite who first stood against them, declaring a drought that lasted 3 years.
On Mount Carmel, the fire of God fell, consuming the sacrifice, while the prophets of Baal stood powerless. Yet even after this victory, Jezebel's wrath drove Elijah into the wilderness.
The corruption was not merely spiritual but moral. The story of Naboth's vineyard is the pinnacle of their lawlessness. Ahab desired a vineyard that Naboth refused to sell. Jezebel orchestrated a mock trial, accusing Naboth of blasphemy and having him stoned to death so Ahab could take the land.
It was in that vineyard that Elijah met Ahab and delivered the final sentence. "In the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth, dogs will lick yours."
This prophecy echoed through the years until it finally reached its fulfillment at the gates of Jezreel.
The fall of Jezebel was the total eradication of a legacy built on suffering.
The dogs in the street did not care for her royal lineage, and so, the era of Ahab ended as it began in blood and prophecy. Justice may take time, but the debt is always paid in full.